was in graduate school and I had just started work on my dissertation, I had to do this series of workshops with seasoned academics and researchers basically to teach me what the heck I was doing. Everything from how do you research, how do you do literature reviews, how do you read different types of research, how do you compile it together, how do you formulate your own studies, how do you go out there and execute them, how do you analyze the data, all that good stuff. I was taught over the course of a couple of years exactly how to do that. And one of my advisors said something to me at the very beginning that I will never forget. It was when we were kind of workshopping in groups and thinking about what topics we wanted to write our dissertation about and how we could make arguments for different theories that we had. He said, you can always find research to back up whatever point you want to make. A lot of what you're going to be doing is just finding ways to rationalize your perspective. And no matter what, you can always, in the breadth of the literature that exists, you can always find research that are going to rationalize your perspective, because there will always exist research on both sides of the argument, and it's a matter of compiling that research and making your best case. Now, I'll also say this, he also very much impressed upon us the importance of looking at research that is contradictory to the theory that you have, that might go directly against what you believe is happening, in order to keep your own confirmation bias in check. Confirmation bias is essentially when we only look at research and information that backs up the points that we want to make or what we already think is happening. And confirmation bias happens all the time. Certainly throughout the pandemic, we have seen many instances of confirmation bias, and frankly on both the right and the left, where people are only looking at research that backs up the point that they politically, most of the time, want to make. And so, we've been inundated, people like me who've always questioned the effectiveness of massive lockdowns, of shutting down the economy, of forcing millions of small businesses to close, hundreds of thousands of which will never reopen, of creating these environments where we are really inhibiting humanity from the full breadth of the human experience. I have always questioned the wisdom of this, but I was always willing to go along with it at the beginning because we didn't know exactly what the data said or what the virus would do, and there were just a lot of unknowns. So I was always willing to go along with it for a short period of time. But in my opinion, and I am just a psychologist, I am not a medical professional, but in my opinion, we have now reached goddamn crazy town, because the people that are making the decisions to continue these lockdowns, to close down our economy, are only looking at data that they agree with. And here is an example of a piece of data that might be helpful to look at in places like New York and Michigan and Los Angeles and in Boston, any place that is still, New Jersey, still mostly locked down. This is an article that they should want to read. And so we are going to read it here. This is going to be a little bit more of a boring video because I think that it is very important that we read this article. I'm going to provide a little bit of additional commentary, but in this case, I think that this is an opinion that should kind of stand on its own. So we're going to look at this piece from the Wall Street Journal, The Failed Experiment of COVID Lockdowns. New data suggests that social distancing and reopening haven't determined the spread. Who would have thunk it? Let's take a look at what Donald Luskin has to say. 6 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. has now carried out 2 large-scale experiments in public health. First, in March and April, the lockdown of the economy to arrest the spread of the virus, and second, since mid-April, the reopening of the economy. The results are in. Counterintuitive though it may be, statistical analysis shows that locking down the economy did not contain the disease's spread, and reopening it did not unleash a second wave of infections. And I'm going to emphasize this for our YouTube overlords. This is according to statistics. This is according to math. This is according to science. And we're going to explain in the course of this article what exactly the statistics say. Considering the lockdowns are economically costly and create well-documented long-term public health consequences beyond COVID, such as the complete decimation of New York City, imposing them appears to have been a large policy error. At the beginning, when little was known, officials acted in ways they thought was prudent. But now evidence proves the lockdowns were an expensive treatment with serious side effects and no benefit to society. Trend Marco, my analytics firm, tallied the cumulative number of reported cases of COVID-19 in each state and the District of Columbia as percentages of population based on data from state and local health departments aggregated by the COVID Tracking Project. We then compared that with the timing and intensity of the lockdown in each jurisdiction. That is measured not by the mandates put in place by government officials, but rather by observing what people in each jurisdiction actually did, along with their baseline behavior before the lockdown. This is captured in highly detailed anonymized cell phone tracking data provided by Google and others tabulated by the University of Maryland's Transportation Institute into a social distancing index. Measuring from the start of the year to each state's point of maximum lockdown, which ranged from April 5th to April 18th, it turns out that lockdowns correlated with a greater spread of the virus. States with longer, stricter lockdowns also had larger COVID outbreaks. The 5 places with the harshest lockdowns, the District of Columbia, New York, Michigan, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, had the heaviest caseloads. Now, you may be saying, well, of course they had the heaviest caseloads if they had the harshest lockdowns. Of course the harshest lockdowns would follow the heaviest caseloads. That just makes sense. Wait for it. It could be that strict lockdowns were imposed as a response to already severe outbreaks, but the surprising negative correlation, while statistically weak, persists even when excluding states with the heaviest caseloads. And it makes no difference if the analysis includes other potential explanatory factors such as population density, age, ethnicity, prevalence of nursing homes, general health, or temperature. The only factor that seems to make a demonstrable difference is the intensity of mass transit use. We ran the experiment a second time to observe the effects on caseloads of the reopening that began in mid-April. We used the same methodology, but started from each state's peak of lockdown and extended through July 31st. Confirming the first experiment, there was a tendency, though fairly weak, for states that opened up to have the lightest caseloads. The states that had the big summer flare-ups in the so-called Sunbelt second wave, Arizona, California, Florida, and Texas, are by no means the most opened up. Politicized headlines notwithstanding. So I want to make sure that's really clear, because there were all these headlines about the second waves in Arizona and California and Florida and Texas, and oh no, we're all going to die because people are opening up and eating in restaurants again. Those states were not the most opened up states. You know where we didn't hear headlines from were the most opened up states. So this is exactly what it's saying. It's like, this is a completely politicized issue at this point, where the media has just run amok and will run whatever headlines they can to infuse the most outrage and fear into the public as they possibly can. These people have absolutely no interest in telling us the truth. The lesson is not that the lockdowns made the spread of COVID-19 worse, although the raw evidence might suggest that, but that the lockdowns probably didn't help, and opening up didn't hurt. This defies common sense. The theory, the spread of an infectious disease ought to be controllable by quarantine. Evidently not in practice, though we are aware of no other researcher who understands why not. We're not the only researchers to have discovered this statistical relationship. We first published a version of these findings in April. Around the same time, similar findings appeared in these pages. And what he's referring to there is this editorial: no, do lockdowns save many lives? In most places, the data says no. The speed with which officials shutter the economy appears not to be a factor in COVID deaths. And this was on April 26, 2020. So this is not new information. And now we have at least 2 studies that are confirming the same thing. And again, I want to emphasize what I said at the top. You can always find studies to confirm what you want to tell, but what is alarming to me is that stuff like this won't even be considered. I will probably get in trouble for posting this video. If I posted this on Facebook, I would probably get another account warning, although they wouldn't exactly tell me why. If I posted this on Twitter, who knows what would happen? We're not even allowed to consider this information. That's actually what alarms me the most, is that we are in a place where technology companies and the children, frankly, that are doing the moderation at these technology companies are making decisions about what data and what evidence that we can consider. That's crazy. I should be able to consider this. I should be able to consider this corresponding study that came out back in April, and this shouldn't be a problem to have a discussion. If your data is sound, if your science is sound, it can undergo scrutiny. In July, a publication of The Lancet published research that found similar results looking across countries rather than U.S. states. A longer time period to implementation of any lockdown was associated with a lower number of detected cases. I'm going to say that one again. A longer time prior to implementation of any lockdown was associated with a lower number of detective cases. Those findings have been enhanced by sophisticated measures of actual social distancing and data from the reopening phase. There are experimental controls that this research lacks. There are no observable instances in which there were either total lockdowns or no lockdowns, but there's no escaping the evidence that at minimum, heavy lockdowns were no more effective than light ones, and that opening up a lot was no more harmful than opening up a little. I'm going to say that one again because I flubbed it a little bit, and this is a really important point. There's no escaping the evidence that at minimum, heavy lockdowns were no more effective than light ones, and that opening up was no more harmful than opening up a little. Opening up a lot was no more harmful than opening up a little. Apparently, I'm just destined to flub this sentence, but you guys get what I'm saying. So where's the science that would justify the heavy lockdowns many public health officials are still demanding? Not just public health officials. Joe Biden has like 2 policy positions right now, so far as I can tell. Well, no, I'll be generous. I'll give him 3. The first policy position is anything that Trump does is bad. Anything Trump does is wrong. Anything Trump does is racist and homophobic and, all the other phobes and whatever. Trump is bad, Orange Man bad. So that's Joe Biden policy position number 1. Joe Biden policy position number 2 is that when he gets elected, he is going to mandate that every single person wear masks. And Joe Biden policy position number 3 is that he is going to re-implement these lockdowns. That's what he stands for right now. This is not just public health officials. This is a person that is literally running to be the president of the United States and can force us to lock down the economy. Or I guess he probably can't force us. Like if Trump can't force the states to reopen, then Biden probably can't force the states to lock down. It's probably still a state's decision. But we have someone running to be the president that desperately wants us to keep the economy shut down, keep people in their houses, and, by the way, what's going to happen when that happens? People are going to get even more dependent on the government. With the evidence we now possess, even the most risk-averse and single-minded public health officials should hesitate before demanding the next lockdown and causing the next economic recession. One would think that also a presidential candidate would not want to cause another recession. But that is exactly what Joe Biden is proposing, because we are not allowed to consider information like this. This boggles my mind. This is actual insanity. We have got, my opinion, again, I'm not a medical professional, but my opinion is that we are doing, at this point, much more harm than good by keeping things locked down, by keeping people in their houses, by keeping people from working, by keeping small businesses from opening, the societal impact of what we're doing is going to be felt for a generation. And I don't know why we can't even consider information like this that says it might be okay if we opened up again. Alright guys, that's all I've got for this video. If you enjoyed it, if you like the content I'm producing, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel, sharing the video out, giving it a thumbs up, turning on those notifications, all that good stuff. And that's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.